At the start of this channel's existence, I made a video about who I thought was the worst cat in the entire game, and while I still think that it being Firefly makes sense, I still think that the most useless is completely different. Unlike Firefly, who I would call the worst for being a waste of high value materials, being an oversaturated meta, and having horrible HP and range for what he's supposed to do, useless would mean that this would be a unit you'd get maybe through a bit of hardship and probably never use at all. I want to go through a few units today for candidates for who I think qualifies as the most useless, but of course before the video starts, here's a verse from the Bible. Proverbs 16:3. Commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. What do I mean? By useless, I mean a cat that you get and then immediately or soon after have no reason to use them. While this can coincide with bad, it doesn't always mean that the cat is bad. For example, of a cat that's actually on the list, Luxury Bath is definitely not a bad cat, but once you get Courier, they quickly become useless, while someone like Lil Dark is both outclassed and actually bad. I'll include Ubers this once, but only the ones I have experience with. Normals. Dark Cat. We all know about Dark Cat. He's one of the first units I made a video about before I got my first 1,000 subs. Watch that video if you haven't. I still think it's good, but Dark Cat mostly suffers from having low stats, 3 knockbacks, and costing too much. Low stats because at max, he only has 2.4k DPS and 17.8k HP. That's basically nothing, and Wildcat has more HP than him and only a knockback on death while costing half. There's not much to say about Dark since it's obvious once you get cats like Thor and Elemental Duelist that he's clearly outclassed. Super Feline. This might be controversial to you super endgame players, but for most people playing the game, this cat will basically never be used since you have to spend a total of 20 million XP once you get him, and then you have to wait until your user rank is 1501. That's completely insane, and even though he becomes great with at level 20 plus 90, 10k DPS and massive damage versus relics, which gives him 41k DPS or 101k damage per hit, and the massively important buff of staying stationary after attacking until he's ready to attack again like Bullet Train. For most of the game, you probably won't be using this unit since before this point, he's not that great, especially in comparison to other anti-relic units, which is why I'd call him useless. As for a lot of the game where he would be incredible, you just wouldn't have access to his final form and you'd have to deal with a like 20 plus 50 super feline like mine, who only has 24k HP, and while he has 27k DPS versus relics, he doesn't stay still after attacking, making him unusable because most of the time with his crappy HP, he's gonna get a single hit, run in immediately after getting that hit, die, and then I have wasted 2.4k C. Not worth it. Specials. Hyper Mister. While Mister is kind of useful at the start of the game as a rusher, he's quickly made useless by Cowcat and especially Manic Lion later in the game when you get Hyper Mister. The best thing you can do with this cat is get his KB ability versus zombies, as by this point, Hyper would have 47 movement speed, which is 19 less than Manic Lion. With a 0.6 second attack cycle and at max 30% KB chance versus zombies, this guy's only real use is pushing zombies back just in case they get too close to the base. His area attack makes his ability to KB zombies a bit better, but this kind of situation is niche, and outside of being able to do this, his stats even at level 50 with max talents are still bad. And if your stage is mixed, then he could easily be wiped out. This is his only usage, and it's why I decided to put him on the list. Val. With 230 range, low DPS, and low HP despite his 100% wave chance and cheap cost, he basically is outclassed in the face of Pirate Cat despite him having no area attack or wave due to Pirate having higher range. Val's 230 range versus Pirate's 300 is a big difference, as with it, Pirate can more safely push Reds back, though he can't outrange any new Reds. On top of this, once you get Courier, there's less reason to even use Val because Courier is so powerful and because you get them at basically the same time, despite Val's true form being extremely cheap. Lil Mohawk. All you get after doing this very difficult stage with the 4-star restrictions is a 45C cat with a weirdly slower cooldown than normal meat shields. While him costing less than other cat variants is sorta nice, the slower cooldown requires you to use a research combo in order to bring it back to normal. Depending on your situation, putting Catasaurus in your loadout in order to achieve this by getting the research combo is either useless when you could just use Manic Cat or different meat shields, or just a different cat variant, though sometimes if you're fighting metals or something, the Catasaurus and Lil Mohawk combo could be fine, though again, most of the time it doesn't make sense to use this cat since the easiest alternative exists. Lil Dark. Lil Dark is completely useless. He has stats that outside of max are far worse than the original Darks, and he targets angels, which is way worse than the original since angels usually push harder and have more range. He could get talents to target Aku, but their immense damage is of course impossible for Lil Dark to take, even if he gets resistance against Surge. The only talent that maybe could theoretically help is his 2-second freeze chance at a 20% chance, though it's a 20% chance. His range is terrible and his HP is worse than that of Dark's if you don't max him out or talent his attack or defensive talents. Mecha Bun. I personally like this unit, but he's basically useless for a lot of reasons. For one, his stats aren't good enough for his role as an imitation of Bun Bun. A max HP value of 108k and 190 range is barely anything at the level you get him. In fact, it's only about 20k more than Jamera, and even though he naturally has 12k DPS, which is solid, this DPS barely gets him anywhere because of his, again, low HP value for what his role is, and because he has 2 knockbacks, meaning that he only has 54k HP per his 2 knockbacks. 54k HP is totally nothing to most enemies, and only in specific scenarios would he even be usable. Mixed with his awfully high cost of 3.6k C and his almost 100-second cooldown, and you can see why he's not only a hard to use unit, but impractical in most situations. Against relics, he can be useful if he has a straightaway against maybe a long range unit, since he'd have 216k HP and 18.4k DPS. These stats are solid, but even then, 216k HP isn't that much versus relics due to their generally super high DPS. All that needed to be improved for this unit's true form would be to give him something like 200k or 300k HP naturally, so that his KB point would be at 150k. And against relics, he'd have 600k HP, which would let him actually survive relics for a solid amount of time. He'd be both worth his cost, cooldown, and he could be an actual game changer in later game scenarios. But that's not what we got, and thus he deserves to be on this list. Rares. Enchantress. I'm confident that I don't really need to explain why Enchantress is one of the most useless cats in the game. She has a 20% chance to slow reds for 5 seconds and 250 range, and with talents this ability extends to zombies, though because of how oversaturated reds are as a trait given the fact that they're literally the first one, it makes no sense to use this cat outside of the extremely early game. And even then, debuffing enemies isn't that prevalent, and the only reds you'll be facing are enemies like Sir Seal and Piggy, and by the time you fight One Horn, you probably have better debuffers like maybe Apple, or you just, again, wouldn't need debuffers yet. Her zombie talent seems nice until you realize Psycho has the same talent with 365 range and a 50% chance to slow, on top of a weaken ability if you decide to talent him. The only thing Enchantress has over Psycho is her 5-second slow, though it's only a second difference and Psycho can have it upgraded to 5 seconds for 75 NP. There's genuinely no reason to use this cat basically ever. RoboCat. Robo has the ability to KB black enemies, but since black enemies naturally have high KB counts and they're very power crept, it kinda makes using this cat questionable. Sir, maybe if Razorback is pushing hard and you slow or freeze it with Bomber Cat, knocking it back could help, especially if he maybe pushes hard. But at the same time, only very rarely has this thought even crossed my mind. With cats like Bomber and their aforementioned generally high KB counts, despite their high HP, outside of someone like a Razorback, if you're dealing with solid damage and hitting with strong debuffs, the blacks will barely even be able to get into your range. Plus, their speed is insane, so you need some great defense to really regain ground. Really, given the black enemy's generally high speed and high knockback count, this cat is for most scenarios ineffective. They have a dodge talent, which activates at a 20% chance for a max of 1.67 seconds, though the activation rate is too low for it to be really worthwhile, and while it definitely could stop black enemies if you have a lot of RoboCats, I just can't see it being worth the 95 NP since this effect would only be useful in black stages. 95 NP for a luck-based 20% chance second of defense doesn't sound that good to me. Seasonal rares. I had to mention the seasonal rares since I predict that if I didn't, people would be like, where are the seasonal rares? But I disagree with the notion of them being useless, although it's a bit on a spectrum, since cats like Kung Fu X, Salaryman, Prisoner, Maiden, and Rampage have actually been useful for me. And even cat combo wise, cats like Koi, Kite, and Madame have been good too. At the very least, these cats have been good for combos, which is also why Monika wasn't mentioned in the special section, since she finds her use in her few cat combos. The most useless one here, therefore, is Vacation, due to her not having many cat combos, and not being as useful in a ranged meat shield sense like Rampage. Though, still, most of these cats find some use in 4-star, and if they get talents one day, then I'm predicting that they'll be treated like personal specials. Super rares. Luxury Bath. This cat used to be useful, but Courier completely outclasses it. Courier only loses out on standing range, health, and not having talents or plus levels. but because of Courier's area attacking damage of 175 through 400 range, higher base DPS, higher movement speed, and attack frequency, for the most part there's no reason to use Luxury Bath. Luxury, with their 400 range, also outranges no notable red enemies in comparison to Courier aside from Cappy, and she can only outrange rare enemies like the Red Malice. The only reason you'd use Bath with her single target, lower DPS and higher cost would be if you don't have Courier, but once you have him, she gets outclassed. Cataphone. Similarly to a lot of cats on the list, if you don't have cats that can slow angels or break barriers, then this cat makes sense to use. Though I never use this cat because I quickly got Sanjil's angel target, and I always had Kitty of Liberty. Cataphone's talents don't help it much either, since unlike a lot of alternative barrier breakers that you'd only use if you didn't have Liberty, you can't use him in 4-star, and his alien slowing talent is covered by Psycho, who has more range than him. Sanzo beats this guy once you get his talents, Psycho beats this guy out if you get his talents, and Kitty beats him out because of her better generalist qualities and natural 100% chance to break barriers. In fact, I only upgraded this cat so I could use it for this video, as for the longest, this guy remained cat projector. Power Pile Driver. Pile Driver's main thing is their Omni Strike ability, though it only hits at a -600 range behind them instead of also hitting in front of them. What this means is that Pile Driver is only going to hit zombies behind them with their 100% 3x multi-hit KB, and while that sounds cool, it really isn't because -600 range isn't that big of a range for this cat. It'd be far more useful if the standing range was closer and the Omni Strike hit from like 350 range to -600, so that all zombies nearby Pile Driver will be knocked back. Because of this, and because attack triggers aren't based off of a unit's Omni Strike range, but instead its standing range, cats like Ectoweight do just as good a job as Pile Driver when it comes to knocking zombies back for over half the cost and better attack speed. There's no reason to use a super expensive cat with low HP for their role, 2 knockbacks, and a bad KB ability due to this awkward range setup. Pile Driver could have been pretty interesting and even extremely powerful if it had all the same stats, but it could start hitting zombies within its -600 Omni Strike range instead of rolling on by. Or even if it hit burrowed zombies, but it just doesn't do this. Brainwashed Eraser. With lower HP than all the other Eraser variants, higher cost, and a worse recharge time, it's fair to say that even though this guy has insanely tough against traitless, he's not very useful. This forces you to use a research combo like Lil Mohawk so that he has a normal recharge time, and whether or not this is worth doing with his at level 50 81k HP versus traitless is up to you, as most of the time traitless enemies are accompanied by other traits, meaning that his at level 50 13.5k HP, which is 2k less than Craze Wall's HP at level 30, is all they'll have to take down. Yes, Craze Wall, not Manic Eraser. Again, this guy can be good in the correct niche scenario, but that very niche scenario is nearly non-existent, and I couldn't tell you a time where I even had the chance to use Brainwash Eraser. It's basically like trying to find a scenario where Robocat is actually a fair choice instead of simply Bomber and Pizza. Brainwash Dark. Brainwash Dark has some of the lowest stats out of all the Dark variants, as at level 50 it's still lower than normal Dark at 20 plus 90 and Manix by level 50, and as for DPS, Brainwash Dark has the lowest at only 750 by level 50. The best thing about him is his 1 knockback, but his baby levels of HP at only 16k even with the strong against traitless, which then gives him 32k HP, does nothing to help him, as it's less than 10k more than Eraser's max HP. This guy literally has Eraser level health against his target and less than him when he's fighting anyone else. His ability is to curse traitless enemies at a 30% chance for 3 seconds with a 100% chance, level 1 mini wave, giving him pseudo area attack and barely some more DPS, but none of that actually helps because in most scenarios, he get wiped out before he can even get a single hit because of his low 150 attack range, crappy HP, and horrible for this roll speed of 14 despite his immunities to freeze, slow, and knockback. And even if he does hit with curse, so what? Most traitless enemies don't have special abilities, and the only ones that this would maybe be useful on is Henry, Mr. Mole, Corey, H-Na, Dober PD, and maybe Boar Jr. And all these enemies are often accompanied by other traits and other enemies to help. Best case scenario, you get a clean few hits on Henry with nobody else on the map, and you wipe Henry out because he can't freeze anymore, but even that's just speeding up an eventual victory. Most case scenarios where this guy hits, he gets in his attack, probably fails since he only curses at a 30% chance, but if he curses, let's just say Henry again, the other enemies are gonna wipe him out, and while a crowd of your guys will be able to move again, it only lasts for 3 seconds. And it's only effective if you timed it in a way where Henry's gonna attack again while he's cursed. For someone like Corey, this could be more useful, and maybe H-Gnaw since that disabled his knockback if you can get in close enough. But again, low likelihood because of this guy's garbage stats, and outside of these niche scenarios, he's totally useless. Manic Dark. Manic has high DPS for what he is, that being at level 50, 4.7k base or 7.1k against reds, and he's easy to stack. Though this DPS is only achievable if he's not being hit thanks to his bad HP at the same level being 16.9k or a measly 5.6k per his 3 knockbacks, and if the enemy doesn't attack that fast due to his cruddy 12 movement speed. There's generally no reason to try and use a Manic Dark DPS spam strat, even though he has such a high number because he's a glass cannon, and not even in the way Manic Flying is, to where he at least has some good range and area attack. It's pretty much guaranteed that this guy's gonna get wiped out if anyone other than the theoretical LD unit you're fighting against with Manic comes out. And again, since Manic has such low speed, using someone like Talented Can or a Quick Bahamut instead of stacking a 300C unit would work better and give you faster, more immediate damage. Ubers. I say this not a lot, but enough. I'm not a big Uber guy, so I don't have that many. But here are some of my most useless ones, and I'll talk about the ones I actually have as opposed to Ubers I don't have. And again, with some of these guys, you may disagree depending on when you get them in the game, though generally, I think that I have very uncontroversial picks. Nurse. Despite her high range of 435 and 460 in her final form and okay DPS, I've never had a reason to use Nurse as either a generalist or a debuffer. Debuff wise, I never needed someone to slow floatings since you can get Sanzo really easily, and black enemies even before I had Bomber weren't that big of a problem to me. I could only really see a lot of usage from Nurse coming from those that have nothing to fight black or floatings with, which is rare, or those who don't have better generalist Ubers, which is also rare unless your luck is unsalvageably awful. For general usage earlier in the game, I mostly stuck to Kenshin for being better against black enemies due to her 100% KB against them and her strong against ability, plus her higher DPS. And super early on, I stuck to Kai Himi, the horse girl, the horse girl, yeah, simply because I got her first. But ever since I got Nurse, I've never seen a reason to use her, despite her, again, very high range and okay DPS, because I simply have even non-Uber options that outclass what she could provide for me. I won't speak on talent since I both haven't gotten any of hers, and I haven't gotten to a point where something like Sage Slayer is actually useful for me. Nobunaga. I've never had any reason to use Nobunaga despite his 100% chance to keep black enemies frozen because I got him by the time I got Bomber Cat. Even before then though, I had units that could deal with black enemies like Immortal Kenshin, debuffers like Cowboy, and super high damage dealers like Pizza Cat. So for the most part, I had immense overkill against black enemies. Nobunaga maybe could have been useful if I got a shoe for him super early, but given his nearly 100-second cooldown, 4.3k C cost, and the fact that he's just outclassed by the more easily spammable Bomber Cat, who just with 2 you can do the exact same thing as Nobunaga with, I can't find any reason to use this cat, and thus I'd say he's useless. Mercia. Her measly 30% dodge chance for 2 seconds versus traitless enemies sounds kinda cool, but it sucks since she has kind of low range. She's also supposed to be a waver, and by her final form she can do level 4 waves, though she also has multi-hit and only throws her wave out on the second hit in the same spot. Since the first hit has some solid damage, it's more than possible that your enemies are gonna be knocked back, especially if you're fighting someone like Randy or Dolphina, and then the wave attack will miss. Most of the actually dangerous straightless enemies that people struggle with, like Randy, Kamel, Araz, Corey, Teacher Bear, Dolphina, Master A, and H-Gnaw, all either have strong pushing power or just more range than Mercia, meaning that she'd rely a lot on her dodge ability. But since it's again only at a 30% chance for 2 seconds, and her attack animation is kinda long, and she only has 10 movement speed, and she has 4 knockbacks, she's probably not gonna get a hit at all on most of these enemies since she's just easy to juggle to death. Especially if these enemies come with some non-traitless support. Just use Slimecat or Graze Gross instead of this unit. Who's the most useless? I gave a lot of possible picks, and I want you to leave your own opinions on who's the most useless unit in the game in the comments. But out of all of these units, I would say that Enchantress is the most useless, with Power Pile Driver in second place and Brainwash Dark in third. Enchantress is certainly usable, but there's never ever any reason to use her throughout the entire game, which is why she's the most useless in my eyes. Power Pile Driver costs too much, and no matter where you are, gets outclassed by Welterweight or Ectoweight, or just any of the other units you may have if it's super early due to his 1500 C cost. And third is Brainwash Dark because he at least has his niche use case scenarios. Other Dark variants could go into this slot, but I think Brainwash Dark made the most sense because of how hard it is to get him, and how much you have to do in order to get him to his final form. Honorable mention is Mercia because she's one of the most pointless Ubers easily in the game, and she totally fails at what she's supposed to do. If you enjoyed this video, then subscribe, check out my other channel where I talk about stories, art, and comics, and join a Discord server. And here's a final verse from the Bible before the video is over. Proverbs 8:10 through 11. Take my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold, for wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. Like the video, comment, and have a good day, everyone. And by the way, go on ahead and become a member if you want to give me that if you want to give me that money. I'd really appreciate that. That'd be pretty cool. And yeah, I think I shouted out everything. Watch all my videos and have a blessed day, everyone. Goodbye.